Hey, everybody. If you hadn't dialed in a few minutes earlier, I'm Jan Nichols. I'm one of the showrunners for today's webinar. I just wanted to take this opportunity to welcome you, say we have some really great things planned for today. And if you have questions, please submit them as we go along in the webinar. We want to make it very interactive. We really want you to get great value out of the time you're spending with us. And most of all, by the end of the session, we want you to realize, yeah, you really can truly, finally get value from data when your enterprise is connected on, guess what? An applications platform just like Fuuz. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Craig Scott. He is the founder of MFGx and the application platform Fuuz. And he is joined today by partner Chris Misztur. Chris is the founder of Mr. IIoT. He and Craig have been partnering on some projects, again, to help manufacturers achieve Industry 4.0, and they will have lots of stories to swap and share with you about that. And by the end of this, hopefully you'll see how you can do exactly the same. So hang on to your hats, buckle down, buckle in, and Craig, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thanks, Jan. So thanks everybody for attending. I see we still have some more folks kind of filtering in here, but I definitely want to take the opportunity right off the bat. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy days to join us here and hear a little bit about what Chris and I have to say regarding data, information, why that's important to manufacturers in particular, and how a solution like Fuuz, which is an applications platform slash iPaaS, is going to help us with that. So I've said before in some of the webinars we've done and just various conversations that I've had with prospects and customers that our industry as a whole has this love or propensity for creating new words for the one thing that manufacturers across the entire industry really want and need, which is a truly connected enterprise. So this extends to your people, your processes, your machines, your business software, your ERP systems, your MES. Just being able to collect and share the data that's captured across the company, as well as with your other global partners. It could be your customers, your suppliers, your outside salespeople, whoever those extended pieces of your network happen to be. So today, Chris Misztur from Mr. IoT and I are going to talk about how this promise of real-time visibility of data is finally being realized and why it's taken so long to get here, as well as why so many manufacturing companies are turning to iPaaS solutions. iPaaS is an integration platform as a service, and that's really what you need in order to achieve this common goal of this connected enterprise. So it goes well beyond the typical approach of going out and looking at various point solutions and trying to duct tape and band-aid all of these things together. So in today's webinar, what we're going to be covering today are the next three topics. So there's going to be some back and forth conversation between Chris and I. We're going to share some insights and some experiences around some projects that we've worked on, and primarily want to hit these three high-level topics. So we want to talk about an applications platform, which is the Fuuz product. We want to talk about the industrial Internet of Things, IIoT. After all, we do have Mr. IIoT with us today. And then we want to get into iPaaS, or integration platform as a service. A lot of people that I talk to aren't very clear about what an iPaaS is or why it's relevant, in particular to their digital transformation journey. So this whole concept or terminology is very prevalent amongst really large organizations, but not so much in the small, mid-size. And then, we even find that there are some larger companies that struggle with it as well. So for the record, no manufacturing company has ever come to me because they have a desire to go into digital transformation, right? Or they have some industry 4.0 problem. They just come to us because they have a problem or problems. and they're looking for a solution. They're looking for a tool set that can help them address multiple needs across their business, not just one thing in particular. So Chris and I collectively together are in the business of solving these exact types of problems for our clients. And so Chris and I are going to talk a little bit about a project that we've been partnering on, and why the challenges that this particular manufacturer has been grappling with are relevant to your business challenges. So kind of a fun couple of slides here. Um, Gets into a little bit about our different alter egos. So, I'm all about getting things done right and, solving those problems that no one else in their right mind would ever want to take on. Most people that have worked with me or the rest of my team would likely agree. We're usually dealing with highly complex problems which require complex solutions. And historically, that's led us to, you know, uh, piecing together multiple different things, right? In the past, we need to add a SQL database and we need some front end. So let's write some PHP. Let's, tag on all these different elements in order to address this particular problem. But that's really what interests me. And I guess, the team decided that my alter ego is the Flash because of a couple of reasons. One, because I like fast cars. If you don't know that about me, um, kind of a motorhead, definitely into cars and motorcycles and anything that moves on wheels. But I also like to solve problems fast as well. So, that's one thing that we really strive to do, Chris and I. We like to get in, understand the situation and address it and put a solution in place as quickly as we can. So I'll just get into a little bit of my background for those of you that don't know. Early in my career, I had my first encounter with an AS400 running CMS. So some of you probably remember that. It was pretty ugly. I mean, it was a green screen, and it reminded me of DOS, basically. The first computer program that I ever worked with. And I was working at the time in a pretty high tech manufacturer. We had laser cutting machines, we had robots, we had all this fancy automated, CNC equipment on the shop floor, but we were failing miserably on the back end. We had spreadsheets, databases. I mean, management team would spend hours prepping for meetings, never sure if the info that we had to present was even accurate. So I was the engineering manager at the time. I was brought in to help kind of streamline and make things more efficient. So I got together with our IT manager. Between him and I, we put our brains together and we developed this quoting application, which at the time, this was 25 years ago. So, at the time we were piecing together multiple different things to make this happen. We had a SQL backend and yeah, he was writing PHP, right? So, we built all of that business logic. What it enabled us to do was really reduce our tack time from weeks to just hours in terms of preparing quotes for our customers. So we were typically quoting very complex assemblies, talking like frame assemblies for passenger buses and things like that. So there were hundreds of components and weldments and subassemblies. It just took forever to quote these things and to break down all the drawings. So at the end, after we had gotten this quoting system together to enable our sales group to be more efficient, we won a lot more business, of course. We had it integrated into the AS400, which ultimately saved my engineering group hours upon hours of additional time once we were awarded that project, right? So we were no longer having to interpret these handwritten quote sheets or go back and break down all of the drawings again and siphon through various CAD models and do all these kinds of things, which ultimately led to manually creating parts and bombs and routings and all of that in our ERP system. So that was all automated. It was a click of a button. It was amazing. What I was able to do with that was reduce my 10-person engineering team, which at the time when I started with the company, we were launching about 250 parts per year on average. We took that down to a 4-person engineering team, and we were launching 800 new part numbers on average every calendar year. So just that streamlining and efficiency and getting the systems talking and working together has a huge impact on a company. So later, after that, I took some of those experiences. Um, I became a part owner of a tool and die company in Ferndale, Michigan. So we were building large stamping tools, large progressive dies, line dies for tier one automotive suppliers. After that, I moved on. I started a prototype company of my own, which focused on high precision machining, six-axis laser cutting, bending, forming, welding, assembly, things like that. And ultimately found myself being landed into the world of ERP when I was working at a company called Plex for a while. Some of you may know that one. Um, all of those experiences together really led me to where we are now. And that's what prompted me to launch this product several years ago. So just all of that pain that manufacturers are facing, I learned firsthand. So I didn't read about it in a book. I wasn't sitting in some big tower somewhere, just idolizing all these different things and doing kinds of research. Like I was there, I was living it, I was sweating alongside everybody else trying to get all this done. um, and I learned that so many manufacturers just have this focus on the shop floor and buying machines and automating with robotics and all of these and sensors and all of this, and they really kind of take the focus or the shift off of what they could be doing with all of their systems, right, all their software and all of this information that they have at their fingertips. So there's really just a missed opportunity, and that's what led us to develop this applications platform. And that's really where we're going to see increasing margins, profit margins, and better bottom lines as we move into the future, right? The future is higher volume of transactions with less people having to touch it, right? And that means we have to automate and we have to integrate these different systems. So that's what we're here to do with our platform and with Mr. IIoT, and helping our customers and clients, empowering them and enabling them to uh, kind of bridge that gap between being a manufacturing company and being what you need to be in the future, which is a little bit more of a tech company, right? So we're really moving in that direction, and that just gives you a little bit of background about myself. And now we're going to introduce our guest today, which is Mr. Chris Misztur, and let him do a little talking about himself and introduction. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, Scott. Uh, this is really there's first time hearing that story, and there's a lot of parallels. I similarly come from a manufacturing background. I was always much more interested in the information side, but also through my journey, I saw things that could have been done better. And I always strive to do the best that I could. And when I reached that kind of plateau of, I guess, my influence and authority in any kind of corporate environment, I chose to make a move and go off on my own, because I knew that I could build a team that could do all those things that I've always wanted to do without a lot of the red tape, and at the same time educating the customers along the way, because I think that's still a big part that's missing. You have a lot of different vendors trying to sell everybody different things, and it's hard for decision makers to really pick out what's true. What's true now might not necessarily be true in the next 5 years. It might definitely be not true in the next 10 years. And how do you, as a company, align yourself with all the strategies that might be going on across the enterprise? And that is what I aim to do, is also educate. My alter ego has been chosen as the Spider-Man, and kind of thinking about it, it makes sense. It's very much like we've weaved webs in the enterprise side over the past decades. It's time to weave similar webs on the factory side, so that both the north side of the enterprise and the south side of the enterprise can talk to each other. Uh, and I started my journey back in 2015, really getting into the connected factory, connected enterprise side of things, when We work side by side with Kepware, right? They still, their product is one of the best. I mean, has multiple drivers where you can actually talk to various machines, different protocols, which hasn't been standardized because you got Rockwell that's doing their thing, you got Mitsubishi's doing their thing, and you know, they're two different companies talking to their equipment differently. So when Kepware was launching the IoT gateway with the promise of connecting the factory to the enterprise via HTTP, MQTT, these more modern protocols that IT is more familiar with, um, as we scaled out, try to scale out and pilot various initiatives across the company that I was with at that time, I we eventually reached different ceilings of what we could do, how we could scale, and everything seemed to end up being another bolt-on. So fast forward to now 2022, and while I still think that the OT and the IT gap is still very wide, it's more so in terms of skills and the variability of the different approaches of building a digital foundation. There's some common concepts that are solidifying, and it really is taking a step back and looking at the picture as a whole of where we see the industry going in, where the company wants to see itself, the direction it's going in, and really putting some of these concepts that are back and looking at the standards that are being established in the industry and applying those so that your guys' companies can end up and benefit from some of the same experiences that we've gone through over the past decades and not have to make the same mistakes that we did. Similarly, I love a good challenge. And I think part of that is due to the expectations that as I was growing up, you know, my father always wanted me to do things and do them right. And it's kind of just got instilled in myself that I have high expectations of myself, I have high expectations of my team, and that's what helps us deliver right, usually the first time, to our customers as well. Slide, please.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. That's great. So we're going to get into a little bit more about Industry 4.0, you know, and what all of this connectivity is about. You know, and I think this is a really accurate statement about where technology is heading, because it's happening. It's happening right now, and it's happening everywhere. Right. So the applications platform, I use Fuuz as an example, is the home for all enterprise applications: ERP, MES, accounting, HR, payroll, CRM, right? Industrial connectivity. You know, Chris touched on that a bit with, you know, your Rockwell and Mitsubishi and Siemens. You've all these different makes and models out there, and everybody offers their own way of collecting the data and analyzing that data. Um, and what we're really trying to do with a platform like this is bring it all into one central spot. You know, it's certainly not an easy task. Requires some effort, but once you get it there, it's really a thing of beauty. And you know, think of Fuuz as a digital operations platform, right, where all of the software that you use to run your business, it all lives together. And so, you know, why this matters is because there's things like pre-built connectors, which help accelerate the deployment of apps and connectivity in between different major software platforms. And you know, before the rise of the quote unquote platform, point solutions were the only way that manufacturers were able to configure their ERP around their needs. Right, just like I was mentioning earlier, um, in the days of the AS400, right? Or let's just say on premise in general, ERP implementations were highly customized, right? And they had to be able to solve very specific problems for a very specific customer. There was generally a team of consultants that would come in, you know, business process guys. There was a team of developers that would come in. You basically were building custom software. That's what an ERP implementation was. Now, if you fast forward a bit with the advent of cloud and SaaS software, these solutions have shifted away from that methodology to being, what we coin now as configurable, right? So, you choose from a set of various options that are presented to you. They're somewhat inflexible. You can choose any color as long as it's black, right? And then, there's much less personalization, generally speaking. So this adds more workarounds and the need for more third-party bolt-ons or, process concessions, right? And so these things can lead to more applications or bolt-ons than you probably want or need, as well as increase overhead to run all of these things. More licenses to maintain, more things for people to learn, and so on and so forth. So, the end result here is that any ERP or MES solution would typically get you 80% of what you wanted, but not everything you needed. And that really has introduced the age of the bolt-on, which we see all the time, right? There's your Kepwares, and there's all these other things out there which we consider to be bolt-ons. Yes, they do a wonderful job at specifically what they do, but they introduce more complexity to an enterprise, and so much that many of our customers, quite frankly, were ready to abandon their ERP solutions because it was just too expensive and became too complicated, and it would take too long to get anything done. Um, so Chris, I'm interested to hear, what's your take on some of the history of, how we got to the current state of things, going from on-prem customization to cloud, everything's more rigid. What do you got to add there?
I agree. Having been through multiple ERP implementations, it's kind of it's a very fine line because, right, every single, whoever you go with, Oracle, IBM, whatever you got, underneath it is a database, and to fit, the database comes with a predefined structure based on previous experiences of what a process might look like, whether it's a scheduling, procurement, accounting, whatever process. And eventually the goal of all those platforms is the data has to come to a rest somewhere, and that's in the database. And I don't think that works anymore because you end up with these rigid structures that now dictate how your process should be run. And then if you try to change the process, you really can't, because then your software breaks. So I think there's going to be pockets of complexity still, but my thought is that if you're able to keep the data in motion and not settle it, not settle these transactions, whatever they may be, right away, it might give you a more opportunity to actually pick out the data that you need and that you actually care about. Because if you're just in it to run your end of month reports to get the financial statements, well, that kind of defeats the purpose of real-time data. And like you said, there's typically multiple teams working on an implementation. Everybody's got a specific role to play, so it ends up in these siloed execution, and things start to end up being very, very specialized. I know that a lot of companies, they also, there's things like lean manufacturing, right, where the companies attempt to make a culture shift, and then they add on more work to the people that are supposed to be doing the job on the floor, let's say. Then now, instead of the operators becoming doers, they're becoming doers and thinkers, but they're still doing it with like paper pads. It's like, here, track the number of minutes of downtime per day, and that doesn't work. It just doesn't scale. You got an operator running 5 different machines, that data is going to be very inaccurate. So connectivity, yeah, I'm a true believer in connectivity. Whether it's your house, your factory, anything, I mean, that's how you get to that. It's kind of the basis. If you don't have those connections set up, you're limited as to what you can actually see, how accurate it is, and how quickly you can make a decision on something.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. So I'm going to jump in, talk a little bit now about iPaaS, right? So again, integration platform as a service. This is something that not everybody is familiar with. Again, industry term, but right now we're in very interesting times. We look at it as a time of opportunity, and when our technology has evolved to a place where we can connect multiple SaaS software applications as well as on-premise applications into that single platform, like Chris was talking about, right? You really, this concept of data finding a home or resting somewhere is kind of it's a paradigm shift, right? Everybody wants the data, they want access to the data. Having it live in one silo just is complete opposite of what everybody's looking for now. So it's a little bit like the idea of a place for everything and everything in its place. So to talk for a moment about iPaaS, so you're probably familiar with SaaS software, right? Software is a subscription. You log in, it's online, it's available, through the cloud. You go to a URL. iPaaS is like that, except it's a platform. It's a more of a virtual space, right? Especially within the context of an iPaaS and a digital applications platform combined. So the users who subscribe to the platform are using it in its entirety. And this is what enables us to keep that data moving and flowing in between all of the different moving pieces of the business. So, iPaaS is growing at a compound annual rate of over 30%. It's almost 14 billion by 2026, which is right around the corner in terms of technology, right? So digital transformation is not a technology project to be finished. Rather, it's a state of perpetual agility. It's always ready to evolve for whatever customers want next, right? And that's what we try to do is educate our customers in that there really is no such thing anymore as let's buy a piece of software, implement it, and run, right? You really need to think about these as projects. They're more holistic. Going with an iPaaS or an applications platform like Fuuz is something that we're going to have for a long time. Something like 65% of all IT departments over the next several years are going to be looking for no code, low code solutions to drive their organization forward. They're going to be leaving behind and abandoning these point solutions, right? Why learn and maintain 15 or 20 different software applications when you could do it with one? So this is what we're seeing. So Chris, maybe a little bit of your experience, right? You've worked with a lot of manufacturers, distributors. They're doing all sorts of interesting, cool projects, integrating their machines, capturing all this information. Tell us a little bit about your experience with these customers and what their expectations are and how those grow over time.
Yeah, yeah. It depends on the size of the company for sure. The smaller companies, where the owner's present, he feels that he has a handle on everything. He knows everything that's going on. So the concerns are a little bit different. But then the larger companies, when you start getting into really making sure that the quality of the product is, and maybe it's regulated by government or some other somewhere else that it has to meet very strict regulations, the focus shifts on more to that holistic approach, because to get to the proper quality, certain things have to fall in place. And yes, companies have different needs, definitely. A lot of people, from the connectivity standpoint and knowing what's actually going on the factory floor, start off with, dashboards, right? And then we try to understand, well, what is it that you really want to get out of looking at these dashboards? Because you can look at all the data you want, but if you don't take any action, say on the top 5 items in your Pareto chart of what maybe the reasons for downtime are, how is that the supply chain because you don't have enough material, you can't run the parts. Uh, Really getting to the root cause of these issues is what's going to make a difference. And having this data is allowing them to make incremental changes and not slide back to the way that they were previously operating, obviously within whatever's within the control. And if it means that changing suppliers for some material that they have now there's a 6-week lead time instead of a 1-week lead time. So it really depends. And also the other thing that's always been very difficult is as you sift through all this data from the equipment, from the enterprise, from the financial systems, it's really difficult to put a dollar value on anything really, because there's so many different systems at play, so many different data sets. So companies really do need a central place to be able to integrate all this data and see it and make the proper calculations, because there's a lot more that goes into, if you're scrapping say 5,000 pounds of stuff a week, how you write that off is going to also play a part in, is this important and urgent need, so that do we need to look at how we utilize and what our machine capabilities are, because we're scrapping all this, either whether it's parts or just raw material. So yeah, sorry, I'm kind of talking all over the place here. Trying to narrow it down is still a challenge, and it really depends on situation to situation.
Totally agree. Yep. Every business is a little bit different. Their needs are different, and the opportunities, right? Whether they're challenges or opportunities, all kind of vary based on what they need. So definitely, thanks.
Yeah.
So real quick, I won't spend a ton on this slide here, but this is an illustration that kind of represents the way that we think about iPaaS and collecting all this data. You can see, we're in the middle, right? And these iPaaS, it's like tentacles that reach out, and allow us to connect to all of these different business solutions. And this really is, in our belief, the only way to get Industry 4.0 where it's truly meant to be. It does extend well beyond just the simple connection of machinery and equipment on the plant floor. So next I want to get into something I'm sure we've all been waiting for, right? So um, talking a little bit more about this partnership between Chris and I, right? So we've got a client. They've got multiple sites. They're in mixed mode manufacturing, so they're doing repetitive, non-repetitive. Um, about a year or so ago, they attempted to walk down this path of Industry 4.0. Now, for them, that journey looked more like connecting machines, monitoring them, things of that nature, right? And they spent about a year on that endeavor, and I don't know how much money, right? But it was a failed initiative, right? So it stung really bad, and that was all prior to them learning about the Fuuz platform. So their major challenges were with the ability to extract the right information from the manufacturing equipment. But even then, once they got to that point, and that information was available, the other software that was trying to consume the information had really no way to help them integrate that data to where they wanted it to go. Right. So it just became noise, and it just became all of this information that was being collected, but they really couldn't leverage it. And where they wanted it to go ultimately, in this particular case, was their ERP system. So I think Chris, you maybe have a comment to add here as well about just a little bit about data versus information, right? And how
Yeah,
you would describe that.
I was reading this quote. I'm like, who wrote this quote? I'm like, oh, that's I wrote that quote. That's cool. I didn't even see my name on there. Yes, and yes, there is the data versus information. Once you start really, um, I guess this term that I came up with recently, I call it data point stretching. A lot of companies, what they do is they will get a bolt-on like Kepware, right? That will connect to say a PLC on a machine, and then they're going to carry that data to some middleware. Another place they might want to carry it to is their MES system. Another place they might want to carry it to is somewhere, some other system. And what ends up happening is that the person that made the determination that, oh, this piece of data represents the piece count, something really simple. Now you have these 3 other enterprise business systems that are looking at that piece of data and thinking that it's a piece count. It is. It still is a piece count in all those systems, but they're not just by carrying a simple key value data pair. Piece count is 5, piece count is 6, piece count is 7. The unit of measure doesn't come across. The context of that data point does not come across. Is that a piece count off of this axis? Is that a piece count for the whole job? Is it actually 5 pieces because the cycle finished? And that's the difference. That data is now more like noise. It starts to become very ambiguous depending on where you're looking at it. And the way to get to kind of the information side of it, where you can have context, where you can have units of measure, where that piece of data comes from within the structure and function of the machine or the process, that's where you start getting more and more value out of this information, because you don't have to repeat yourself across 3 different platforms to reiterate what that piece of data actually means. So carrying meaning along with that data gives you a better context, and I like to refer that to as more information than data, because it gets you that much closer to actually building the knowledge that you want to get out of seeing this data or information. And the other part of it is security. And I stress this all the time. These industrial protocols are not safe. These machines were not designed with security in mind. And industry is not going to address this for you. So having proper cybersecurity practices, I mean, it's coming, right? Just like with Stuxnet, how, if you haven't watched that 0 Days documentary, it's a great documentary because it really, I mean, even right now with IT, companies are getting smart enough and hiring security professionals to manage their whole security landscape. And people are not doing that on the factory side yet, because it really hasn't come to be a problem. But I can tell you that it is a problem. And really creating that segmentations of the south side network from the north side network, north side being where your enterprise applications live, and the south side where your actual equipment lives, that if somebody were to manipulate it, could actually cause physical harm to some person, and it's not that difficult to do. So it's a very fine line between the 2 networks, and getting it right without limiting the functionality that we can provide to still, be able to transfer the part files, be able to transfer the CAD data to and from machines, the G-code programs, whatever they may be. It's a challenge, and I think that's a challenge for the coming decades too, especially because the machines that you might have bought 20 years ago, they're still producing excellent quality parts. But if you start to look into what it might cost to upgrade, then you start looking at, oh, it's not only this machine, it's actually a cell that has an automatic tool changer, has this and that, it starts getting a little crazy. So and really at the end of it all, whether you have internal resources to own your own digital transformation or not, you have to get to that point where you are able to own it. Just like you've come to the point of owning your own ERP system, owning the processes that go around and dictate how you move parts from raw material to finished goods. It's no different, and that's also important.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are some really good points, especially with cybersecurity and aged equipment, right? And some of these things that we try to educate our customers on all the time, right? So these these industry 4.0 or iPaaS projects, there's so much more involved than just selecting whatever software shows up first in your Google search. There's a lot more to that, and so hopefully hopefully you guys on the call today can see just how valuable having somebody like Chris as part of your project can really be. So thanks again, Chris, for that. It's really good information.
And and to add to it too is, the people that make decisions about what machine to purchase, right? They're looking at how fast can it make my parts, how much is going to cost me per part, and can it actually make my part? So like the simplest thing to start with is start asking these vendors that you're buying machines from, what does that interface look like between this piece of machine and anything that I might want to do on the IT side? It could be as simple as that to start those conversations, because then once you kind of build your own vocabulary internally of, I need the piece count, I need to know when the machine's running, when it's not, when it's actually cutting, when it's not. Are we going to be looking at, how much are we spending in perishable tooling, and how can we get the most out of our tooling? That those are totally different data points that we have to look at on the machine to even, without making a whole bunch of assumptions and without making complex calculations. Uh, those are good questions to ask of these machine manufacturers.
Yep. Yeah, I think so. The takeaway that I get from that one really is that even on the purchase or procurement of industrial equipment is really more of a cross-functional thing these days, as opposed to, like you were saying, historically it would just be operations, right? How I want the machine that's going to make my parts the fastest. So, make sure that you've got you've got somebody like Chris available to lean on as well, to help make sure that you get the right equipment, not only the right equipment, but it could be software as well. You might be looking at an MES or WMS or whatever. So this really extends all throughout the enterprise. So I've got some anecdotal story here about another customer of ours. This really pertains more to iPaaS, and how we were able to leverage this. This particular customer, fastener manufacturer, global company, they had grown pretty significantly over the years with various acquisitions. And as some of you on the call know, growth through acquisition is very challenging, and oftentimes, or maybe 100% of the time, leaves you with a very segregated digital footprint, right? You have multiple ERP systems, you have multiple accounting systems, multiple reporting systems, and trying to get everything on the same page is certainly a challenge. So this customer, came looking for a solution that could ultimately bring all of that data together for management without spending weeks compiling reports, before anything was even usable, right? So with Fuuz platform, we were able to do is provide them with those integration capabilities that were necessary to replace those tools that were, that they had that were without in-house expertise, right? So they would acquire these companies, and Bob knew how the system ran because Bob wrote the system, but Bob wasn't part of the transition plan. So these were a lot of the risk factors that were presented to us, and why it was important for them to look at a solution like Fuuz for their go forward plan. So what we did was we provided them the ability to eliminate several, almost all of their homegrown solutions across these different acquisitions, that which included access databases, other third-party software packages, and they were all really in place to fit very niche requirements at each of these locations. So, the speed with which the solutions were able to be deployed, even in the early proof of concept stages was really mind blowing. And, the Fuuz platform quickly earned its place as their strategic direction for that organization to get its digital transformation started. So their IT and development teams got ingrained into the application. They learned all the tools. They were able to in-house without our help, build and replace those homegrown solutions that they had. They had spent decades building those. And quite literally the first couple of solutions I know that they had built out, there was metal pricing solutions, contract management solutions, toll processing solutions. Between 2 or 3 of their guys in house, they were able to build these out on the platform within 90 to 120 days. Right. So they were able to eliminate all of those business risks. They were able to get everybody on the same page and do it extremely quickly. So that's another great use case there.
That I think that's really important too, the speed, right? Because once you start looking at your current processes and you start asking the questions, well, why is this person making 5 copies of the same document and storing 4 of them in different file cabinets, and then 2 years later they get packaged up in a box and get taken away and nobody ever looks at them? You're able to kind of figure out how to trim all that because you're looking at that process again, and the speed to which you can get to actually the critical parts of the process and how you can implement that totally resonates with what you guys are trying to do with Fuuz.
100%. So talk a little bit more, to that point, about what an iPaaS solution looks like, right? So as the points on the slide, and I hate reading to all you guys off of a slide, but it really is to connect multiple disparate systems, including, right, some of our well-known friends and partners, right? Plex, SAP, NetSuite, Oracle, Acumatica, as well as other homegrown packages. Ironically, wasn't that long ago, it's a couple of weeks ago, I was approached by a company running an IBM AS400, and they wanted to actually integrate that with a cloud-based ERP solution to address some very specific needs. So, I know those things are still out there. We want to consolidate data, so customer service can more efficiently analyze the inventory and the demand requirements across the different ERP systems that are being used. So this point really hits home with that whole, growth through acquisition type, methodology. And like Chris said, we're entering the same data in 4 different places. Got human error involved, just delays, timing and everything else. Being able to integrate the plant floors, right? That PLC MES layer connectivity. And then, we've seen in a lot of times being able to replace other iPaaS solutions, right? Like a Dell Boomi or MuleSoft or Zapier, Oracle Fusion. There's a lot of them out there. And some of the key differentiators, for us between Fuuz and those solutions is that iPaaS is just a sliver of what our platform does. We really are looking at this at a higher level, right? So, we're looking at this as being an applications platform, or my preferred term for Fuuz is a digital operations platform, right? And iPaaS is just a component of that. So having that ability not only to tie everything together, but also build additional functionality and extend or augment is really key to success, right? So, and this can be where, the home, where your enterprise software lives and works together with your manufacturing software right alongside it, having everything in one, place so you can analyze it. So when this happens, manufacturers can finally really truly get that value from the data that they've been seeking. And Chris and I both know this because we've helped and are helping several manufacturers achieve this currently. So now I'm going to open this up and see if we have any questions from anybody that's attending here today.
Hey, Craig, it's Jan. We do have some questions for you. You started to touch on it in the last few things you said, but someone wanted to know, how do you distinguish the iPaaS portion of Fuuz from the Fuuz applications platform itself?
Yeah, so to distinguish those two things, so we have a module which is it's called our data flow designer, which is really what we consider our iPaaS, right? So that's just the industry term that everybody throws around. It's just one piece or one sliver of the overall collective whole that we call the digital operations platform, which includes iPaaS. It includes the ability to build and create your own data models or database tables, as well as your own user interface around those things, build and create documents, barcode labels, printed forms, things like that. So yeah, it's this whole webinar really has just been focused on kind of that iPaaS connectivity piece, but it's like 5% of the whole platform, and that's really what kind of separates what we offer from the other iPaaS solutions out there in the market, which are helpful, but you're still bolting a bunch of things on, right? You're still adding on Crystal reports, you're still adding on MES and a WMS and external databases, and nothing's tightly integrated, so it becomes like a big Lego project, as opposed to having something like Fuuz, which is was designed to solve all of these problems in a single application.
And to add to that, now that you've kind of described the Fuuz as the digital operations, kind of your centerpiece of everything, I see what I've been seeing is as like your ERP systems and MES systems, they're still going to exist, but they're not going to be in the forefront. And I don't want to talk about Industry 5.0, but I guess I do have to mention is that as the companies get more digitized and digitalized, there's going to be a need for whatever comes next to be both human centric and machine and human and machine, so that they both can interoperate with the system and with each other together. And it really is something different is needed, like Fuuz, where it becomes the center of everything.
Chris, thank you for a great segue to the next question, which is, could you talk about why it should matter that you're no code, low code, pro code? And what does that really mean anyway?
Yeah, so I get asked this question quite often on product demonstrations, right? So there's a lot of buzz, about no code, low code. It's very attractive from an IT perspective because everybody wants to be able to go in and become the citizen developer where they can build and create and deploy and empower their users and their company with solutions that address their specific needs, as opposed to something that's bought off the shelf that they have to conform to, right? So there's a huge advantage in general. But to that point, to answer that question, we cover all three, right? So no code, low code, and pro code, we've kind of coined it, enables, not just the citizen developer, but we're also enabling, that developer, right? This is a developer's tool set as well. So you're able to do much more and much more complex solutions. Typically, no code platforms out there that are available commercially are very centralized into one particular business process. You'll find them in the CRM world, things like Salesforce or Zoho, for example. or you'll find them in maybe fintech. They're very specific, or you'll find them in the service industry. What you're not going to find out there is anything that directly addresses the industrial market. And that's really what we've done, and what sets us apart, right? Is we've made the system so infinitely flexible that it could literally be used, as a standalone iPaaS, or you can develop applications in it, like mobile apps, or we have customers running full MES, full warehouse management, transportation management. These things can be, installed off the shelf, kind of like you get your iPhone and you go to the App Store and you install the app. And then you can hand it off to your IT or your in-house developers, and they can extend it and augment it. And some of our customers choose to go from a blank sheet of paper, and start from scratch, because their processes are just that unique that that's the best path. And when you can do that in such a short time frame, I threw out there, 90 to 120 days. That's a very short time frame to build a fairly complicated solution that you would otherwise be going out and spending hundreds of thousands on subscription and implementation and all of that, right? You can do that in house with a couple of people in 3 months. That's huge, and then you own it, right? To Chris's point. So
Yep.
yeah,
Even me as a hardcore developer, I'm getting more and more used to these tools where I don't have to write 50 lines of code to handle a button click. That's not where the value is.
definitely. Yeah, we want our partners like Chris, and we want our customers to be able to focus on, getting the job done and addressing the need, as opposed to having to, as he just said, 50 lines of code for a single button click, right? Now with Fuuz, you can just drag that button out onto your screen, place it where you want it, and 99% of the work is done for you. Thanks, Jan, for the
Sure.
question there.
Sorry, I was trying to talk. I had to do it at least one time during this webinar while I was on mute.
The mute always gets us.
Yeah. So send me the T-shirt. All right, you're on mute. So one last question, and that was about, and you're going to love it, how long does it take to go live on the Fuuz platform? So I know there's like, well, what are you trying to do on the platform? But so could you maybe answer the question within the context of going live on Fuuz versus maybe a standard implementation?
Yeah, it is a bit of a loaded question. Of all the customers that we have all over the world, there's some consistency, but a lot of different solutions, right? So from typical implementation, so let's focus on MES for a moment, right? If you were to buy an MES solution off the shelf, with its limited capabilities, hopefully it addresses your needs. You're going to spend every bit of 6 to 12 months just implementing the solution, and hoping at the end of that you've covered 80% of what it is that you need to cover, right? So with Fuuz, what we're able to do is get closer to 100%. Generally, it's hard to say you get 100% of anything, but you're going to do that in probably more like 90 days, right? So 3 months. So on about 25 to 30% of the time to get solutions up and running, as we've seen, and with our own experience historically, trying to implement something that's so code off the shelf, right? So yeah, there's always a lot of back and forth with those off the shelf products, right? You don't know what you don't know until you get into it, and buyers make a lot of assumptions about what they can do, and then they learn, unfortunately, halfway through the project that that solution doesn't do what they thought it could do. There's only so much you can uncover in a product demo, or that due diligence period. So yeah, that's a great question though.
Great. Listen, we are 1 minute away from time. Chris, I wanted to ask you, are you going to be at Plex ROK coming up next week?
Where is that?
That would be in Florida. And
Ooh.
All right, so Craig, I just wanted you to have a chance to mention that you and members of the Fuuz team would be there.
Chris will be there with us in spirit, but
Yeah.
myself and Craig Sorgi, John Ohlers, and Stephen Johnson from our delivery team will all be there, ready to meet with current customers of Rockwell as a whole, and prospective ones. So yeah, if you happen to catch this message before then, please stop by and check out our booth and try to stump us with a problem.
We know how you love the oddball problems, Craig. So Chris, Craig, both, thank you for your time today. For those of you that are still on with us, please know that we will have a recording of the session. We will be posting it to the Fuuz YouTube channel. You'll get an email with that. If not later today, then certainly by tomorrow. So thank you everyone for joining Craig and Chris and spending some of your time with us. We hope you found it helpful, useful, and please feel free to get in touch anytime to learn more or just talk about what to do next. All right. Everyone have a great day. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.